The revolution is lit.
Uhuru, comrades, and welcome to today's Omali Taught Me Sunday Study featuring Chairman Omali Shatella. My name is Akilia Nai, Director of Agitation and Propaganda for the African People's Socialist Party, as well as your MC for this morning. Today's study is highly important, and we encourage you right now to invite your friends and family to it. This week, the chairman continues reading from Vanguard Up, Unity of Theory and Practice, the political report to the first Seventh Congress Plenary of the African People's Socialist Party. We're starting on page 50 with the section, The Party's Organizational Manual Must Be Our Bible. For the first hour, Chairman will review the study materials, and in the second hour, we will open it up for you, our live viewers, to ask your questions. It's my honor now to introduce our leadership, the leader of the African nation and the worldwide African Revolution, Chairman Omali Shatella. Uhuru, Chairman.
Uhuru, Comrade Director. I want to thank you for introducing today's discussion, today's study. First of all, I just want to, as I often do, remind everybody that this is a study. The African People's Socialist Party, we initiated the study several years ago as a means to deepen the development or enhance the political and ideological development of members of the party, more directly and specifically the Department of Agitation and Propaganda, the department that's headed by Comrade Sister Akile, who is our director of agitation and propaganda. So this was not designed as just some popular talk fest. Excuse me, comrades. Although many people engaged and involved in a talk fest mode, and that's because of this moment right now, and I'm sure that includes even members of the party, where social media is everything, and there's little among the people contact human beings and a recognition of the need for actual organization among the masses of our people. And that's been diminished by a few things, including the success of the US and government, along with other governments in other places around the world, their success in crushing the struggle of the people, that especially as it made itself manifest in the 1960s and at least up until the early 1970s. So this was hit, wiped out, and what have you, and the people were pushed out of political life. And so now and not only were the people pushed out of political life, but there was a conscious and successful effort made There was a conscious and successful effort made by the United States government that raised up another sector of the African population into positions of high visibility and false leadership. And so, you know, the role of the people was really diminished, and that has affected the consciousness of people, even who we are talking to right now. But this study that we are doing, the studies that we've been involved in, as I said, are designed essentially to enhance the ideological and political development of the party, the Uhuru movement. And those, of course, who want to come into the discussion, that's good. We appreciate that. We think it's important to win as many people into this discussion and to the ideological viewpoint of the African People's Socialist Party. But what we've been doing recently and what we engage in right now is looking at the political report. This is the first political report to the Seventh Congress of our party. And the political report lays out from the Congress is the political report that laid out more or less the 5-year plan of our party, and summed up how we understand the world and our place in it, the place of the people in it, the place of the party in that. And that's what it was designed to do. And this is, as it says, that we're talking here about the unity of theory and practice. So on the one hand, we really, really, really hammer the significance of theory. We are African internationalists. It is something has given rise to a philosophy that helps us to understand the world and from the viewpoint of the African and oppressed masses of the world. That we are now the subjects of history, defining the world and our place in it as independently. And so that's, like a really important thing that we do. So theory is critically important. But we're talking about the unity of theory and practice. Right now we live in a period where, as a consequence of the US government's murder and of our leaders, of many of our leaders, destruction of our organizations and scattering those, the membership who were not massively incarcerated or assassinated, scattering them to the wind. It's the fact is that practice has taken such a real, much smaller role than in the 1960s. And we say that even though we talk about theory and practice, practice is primary. That's it, to the extent that theory needs to be born out of practice. If not our practice immediately as individuals or organizations, but practice that has resulted in an understanding of sorts. And then the practice is the theory is tested by the practice. So it's through practice that we determine whether or not our theory is good theory, if it actually represents the best understanding of the reality that we're confronted with. And so right now, we go through this political report that's a combination itself of theory and practice. And we talk a lot about what it is that we believe. And that's fundamental, because we say that because we want you to understand that the practice that we're involved in, first of all, is something that is informed by theory. It is not just something that we do. And that's really important, because right now, have our organizations, revolutionary organizations haven't been destroyed all around us. There's a lot of practice right now that's happening. And, we talked to about something like more than 10,000 protests, demonstrations, and uprisings that have occurred, I think, between May 25th, 26th, and something like August of this year. But the practice itself was born of spontaneity. It was not tied to a what end. And it was invaluable that the resistance, the uprisings, the protests, but they could not come to revolutionary conclusions. And that was a weakness. The great thing, of course, is that we see a sort of reawakening of the masses, and it represents having broken free, at least temporarily, from the ideological kinds of constraints that had been imposed on the people through the preachers and the African leaders, or those who have been put in front of the people as the leaders through the Democratic Party, that the people had broken free, at least momentarily, from the restrictions that are placed on their brains, on their consciousness, on what they would do, and had broken free, and they were actually involved in attacking the system, notwithstanding the reluctance or inability of the African petty bourgeoisie or the Democratic Party or white liberals or what have you to involve themselves in that. So the people did that. That was a good sign. And that was really important because through doing that, the people learned more about how to struggle. Even having said that, of course, what we saw was that something like the largest turnout for a presidential election in history of this country. And that would give the impression to, at least in the last 100 years, that gives the impression to some people of the belief in the system. But what we know is true is that there's an extraordinarily polarized country with 57% of those white people who voted for Trump. 57% of the white people who voted in the presidential election voted for Trump. And Trump got something like 74 million votes. And compared to the 80 million votes that Biden is supposed to have collected in this process. So it's a highly polarized situation. And but the millions of people participated, and that would give the impression to some people that despite the uprisings and protests that we saw, the people still are firmly convinced that of the relevance and efficacy of the electoral process itself, which is why so many participated. But what we're saying is that is not necessarily the truth. The fact is that Africans in particular were trapped with the assumption that they only had, that Trump was the most formidable enemy that we had encountered in a very long time, and that it was fear of Trump. And an assumption that because of the destruction of the revolutionary movement of the 1960s, people did not feel armed with a capacity to intervene outside of the Democratic Party. And that, of course, is the task of the African People's Socialist Party, is to become such an ubiquitous presence that the people understand that you don't have to be trapped with the Democratic Party. So what we are doing is trying to, and I think effectively succeeded more or less in imposing some science, intervening in the spontaneous activity that we've seen out there with science, to take revolutionary slogans, to take positions out there that and explaining what is going on, so that even the people who are involved and who would be involved and who will be involved in all of the uprising protests which have diminished considerably at this point, but they would at least be informed, and their actions would be informed actions that make demands and impose struggles in the interest of, conscious interest of, a conclusion that takes us closer to actual seizure of power over our own lives. So we've talked about theory, and we've done that a lot in this study. We'll say that some more in this study. Right now, much of what we're doing is talking about the organization, the institutions, and the specific kinds of campaigns that help us to validate the correctness of the theory that we're talking about. And it helps to provide some kind of leadership. We're discussing, these are decisions that we made. We made these decisions coming out of our Seventh Congress in 2018, and coming out of coming out of our first plenary to the Seventh Congress that just happened last year. I'm not going to start on page 50 as we talked about, but you have access to this. You can look at it. I'm going to start instead on page 53. And under the headline, the International People's Democratic Uhuru Movement, NPDOM. The existing iteration of NPDOM was organized by our party in Chicago, Illinois in 1991. We're not the same NPDOM as then. It is the NPDOM that has developed beyond our initial errors and beyond the limitations and subsequent leaders chosen by me, the party chair. And although laws of dialectics mean that contradictions continue to exist and always will, we have built an organization that not only withstands contradictions, but that absorbs them and learns from them, from the contradictions, and moves our struggle ahead in the process. Our development of organization moves us beyond the era of charismatic leadership, where the success of our struggle revolves around a single individual. NPDUM continues to lead and is in the process of doing so, despite the frequent, sometimes disruptive intrusion of colonial contradictions in the lives of some of our leaders and members. And I think this is important just to speak to, because we talk about going out into the world doing this work. And the party is an organization of professional revolutionaries. As I say, we're not part-time people who just sort of volunteer and come in on the weekends and our day off. There's not a time where the lives of the members of our party are not consumed with trying to make this revolution. And what we're talking about is a revolution party that is organized, that is actually organized from the masses of African workers. And when we say workers, we mean unemployed workers as well. And what we're talking about is taking revolutionary theory and making it operational under the leadership of the African working class. And the working class, African working class, is constantly battling 1,000 different kinds of colonial contradictions that's imposed on us, on our lives. In fact, it's these contradictions that have pushed us into political life, that has forced us to build the African People's Socialist Party, and that has determined our strategy for winning our liberation. It has given us an understanding about what we have to do to be free. It's in the African working class communities. These are the people that they talk about being most subject to COVID. I mean, family members dying all around us, or older people being thrust into these hospitals. These are people who can't get work, or when they do get work, it's work that's humiliating and oppressive. And the people whose brothers and sisters and fathers and sons are constantly warred upon by the government, thrown into these concentration camps, these prisons on a regular basis. I mean, yeah, all of this stuff happens to the African nation, but it is the working class, who bear the brunt of this. And there are some really significant reasons that this is the case, because it is the working class that really is the force that has nothing to lose, excuse me, but our change. And it's the working class who have to be in colonized situation, who have to constantly be shuffled into the prisons and kept in the prisons, not only to keep the plantation secure and safe and stable, but also because if the working class were left outside of prisons into a situation where there is no intent and capacity of the colonial government to provide the means by which the class can live with some kind of dignity, can feed, clothe, and house ourselves, then the military force, the state, has to be a pervasive presence in our lives. And the schools have to perennially kick us out because the schools are there to actually enhance our ability to be productive in a society where they're saying there's not going to be any production for most of you. And in fact, there's, where the system is set up more or less to reproduce the petty bourgeoisie and the ideas of the system that can be imposed by a certain sector of our population, perhaps as Du Bois' talented 10th, on the rest of us, who this sector functions as administrators at best of the rest of the African people in the colony. So you got these workers, these poor people who catching all the hell, and they're in the party. And these are the folk who must become the working class intellectuals. They must replace the African petty bourgeoisie that has been imposed on our lives, and they must become the working class. And when I say the African petty bourgeoisie being replaced, some people will be confused by that because in our party, there are people who are professors, some people, a handful of people who are professors and lawyers. There are a couple of lawyers and what have you. But the fact is that we define class differently than that, generally speaking, and we don't have time to have that discussion right now. But what the bigger issue here is the fact that the vast majority of our population of people have to sell their labor power in order to live when they can. And it's extraordinarily difficult. It's oppressive as hell. And here is where we want to raise up a working class intellectuals. And in some instances, this working class intellectuals have already penetrated the universities. They are working class in the sense that they represent Emile Cabral's description of those who might be from the petty bourgeoisie in terms of their location in the structure of the society, of the capitalist society, but they have abandoned the interests of the petty bourgeoisie, and they have united with the interests of the African working class. They have committed class suicide and have become one with the workers. But the basic point that I want to make here is that the party has done this work, and NPDOM has had to deal with building an organization among the workers whose lives are constantly under assault, constantly being attacked, constantly pushed up against the wall, constantly being harassed by the police. And these are not people who are being harassed because they've achieved some kind of political consciousness. These are people who are being harassed because they are located in part of the colony, and the colony must be maintained under the strictest kind of control, and that counterinsurgency methods are always used, are always there in the fundamental strategic role of the counterinsurgency. That is to say, this war being made against the ability of the people to rise up and fight, or if they have risen, to keep them, push them back into servitude. And the fundamental objective here is to achieve this is population and resource control. So in our communities all the time, when we look at gentrification, we're talking in part about population control and resource control. That's what we talk. We look at food deserts, resource control. The very little in economic activity, resource control. And you know, it's even worse today than it was in the 1950s, and there are reasons for that as well. Because at least in the 1950s, under this segregated policies of the United States, openly segregated policy, and de jure, by law, in many instances, this is what was imposed on us on the one hand, but on the other hand, that is something that allowed certain kinds of business activity to thrive in the African community. So there were, in addition to barbershop, beauty shops, and those kinds of things that are there naturally, normally, there were cafes, there were restaurants, there were supermarkets, certainly there were grocery stores of some significance, there were bookstores, there were service stations, there were dry cleaners and things like that in the African community. And that has changed dramatically. And that what we're looking at is population and resource control, when the methods of counterinsurgency were changed to meet the circumstances for our oppressors. But anyway, my basic point here, and I've gone 1,000 miles from that, is that sometimes the work of NPDUM, precisely because it is organized among the working class, has been disrupted because of colonial contradictions that's in the lives of some of our leaders and members, people having to go to courts, their cousins being shot, funerals, this kind of thing. This is a regular condition of organizing. And this is what makes me so proud of the success of our party, because we are just an organization. This is something that throws off a minute the petty bourgeois intellectuals who watch us, because we're not just an organization that's explaining the conditions of the people. We, with all of the data and statistics, which are really important, that kind of thing, but we are the people who are changing, who are bringing the people into political life to change their circumstances. This is the fundamental question. And of course, that sector, the African population, must have its own, working class must have its own intellectual independence, must be able to understand, define, describe, and then act based on those that understanding to actively and democratically participate in its own emancipation. That's a critical factor. That's a critical factor. And for a revolutionary organization, it's not critical for any kind of organization, but if you're a revolutionary organization, which means the intent is to overturn the relationship we have with this oppressor, and I'm not talking about white people don't like us, therefore let's do something else, but I mean there's a structural relationship that the colonizer has to the colonized. And the colonizer can only benefit through this parasitic structural relationship, and the colonized must necessarily suffer as a consequence of that. So we're talking about building an army of the oppressed from among the colonized, the African working class. And it must be conscious of more than just throwing a brick at a cop or even shooting at a cop or something like, or some other force like that that's committed some horrible offense. It must be capable of recognizing that the shot fired or the brick thrown contributes to the objective of overturning this relationship that the colonizer has imposed on us. It's parasitic, vulgar relationship. Anyway, we say that NPDUM continues to lead and is in the process of doing so, despite the frequent, sometimes disruptive intrusion of colonial contradictions in the lives of some of our leaders and members. NPDUM is an instrument of the advanced detachment. As an instrument of the advanced detachment continues to create and develop other competent and devoted leaders. This is due to the tenacity of our party, determined to never retreat from the struggle to defeat colonial capitalist domination of our people and class. Our stance is to never surrender in the face of what has often seemed to be an insurmountable odds. We are determined that with real African internationalists defined liberation after 600 years of European colonial subjugation, no one will ever dominate Africa and our people again. That's our determination, not that we all live happily together. We are determined that with real African internationalists defined liberation after at least 600 years of European colonial subjugation, no one will ever dominate Africa and our people again. NPDUM now functions through the leadership of its International Executive Committee. It is an executive committee that is being modeled and shaped in the process of carrying out its mission as defined by the party. Once a disparate group of individuals or of idealists, liberals, and anarchists coming from a hodgepodge of ideological views, NPDUM's executive committee is now comprised mostly of African internationalists who have learned organization and are becoming more competent every day. NPDUM has established a very promising presence in New York after years of nominal existence following the disorder and discord left in the wake of a previous NPDUM and party leader stationed in the city and in the northern region. Today, more and more Africans are coming into NPDUM. regular political events are carried out by NPDUM that have brought into our embrace and deepened our relationship with honest African militants who respect our leadership in the struggle for African self-determination. NPDUM's work in New York has also contributed to the conditions for strengthening the presence of the Uhuru Solidarity Movement. NPDUM is also contributing to the growth of the party internationally. The African People's Socialist Party, occupied Tanzania, has worked with the NPDUM Executive Committee to organize NPDUM branches in several of the provinces in South Africa. The South African NPDUM organization has a national president, Comrade Zekele, appointed by the APSP occupied Tanzania president, Tafari Mugeri. The capacity of NPDUM South Africa is benefiting from the experience and lessons of NPDUM US. NPDUM benefits from the combined experience and lessons throughout the world, from Houston, Texas, to Sierra Leone, West Africa, and London, England. The ASI, the African Socialist International, is now investigating the ability to establish NPDUM in Ghana, West Africa. This is the work of the advanced attachment of the African Revolution that is building everywhere, every day, to translate theory into practice. This is African internationalism, our theory of practice. Moreover, this is a theory of practice being exercised by leaders that have been and are being developed through the work of forging our revolutionary presence. These are leaders who emerge through the process of practice within our organizational structures. This is an example of how organizational tenacity, unrelenting struggle to build an actual organizational capacity to win our freedom is essential. I want to say this again, because this is important. These are leaders who emerge through the process of practice within our organizational structures, not just practice, but within the organizational structure, because we have people who know how to do a lot of stuff as individuals who are out there, as heads of companies and corporations, but to do this within the organizational structures. This strengthens the revolutionary capacity, even if it's a bumpy road, even if it means that there's certain kinds of struggles to make this happen most effectively, that we don't abandon the revolutionary, the organizational structures that we've created to make the revolution. We can confuse success, carrying out a particular mission or a particular event or a particular campaign. We can confuse success there or capacity there with success for the revolution. Sometimes, most times, if it's ours event, if it's our campaign, it contributes to making the revolution. But the ability to do that is not the same as saying that there is the ability to do it within the structures of our organization. And this is really important, because that's the structure of our organization. Our organization is the instrument through which we will win our freedom. This is an example of how organizational tenacity, unrelenting struggle to build an actual organizational capacity to win our freedom is essential. We may suffer setbacks and disappointments, but we never quit. And because we never quit, because we get Vanguard Up, we continue to develop our capacity to win. NPDUM must also begin to implement NPDUM's regional structure as laid out in its constitution. If we are able to grow and scale, we must make plans to operate our mass organizations on a regional basis. This was addressed in Vanguard, the political report to the Seventh Congress. Uhuru Solidarity Movement must do this as well. NPDUM must also reinitiate a party campaign to win the African masses to political participation in the drive for reparations by creating a reparations certificate that all Africans can sign, indicating their personal demand for reparations. You're going to hear more and more around this issue of reparations moving forward. You've heard a lot. I mean, I can say without any fear of refutation that the African People's Socialist Party played the fundamental role in making the reparations demand what is now like a household word. I mean, we organized the African National Reparations Organization. We organized the World Tribunal on Reparation, the first one of its kind in the history of the struggle of Black people on the planet Earth. We did that in 1982 in Brooklyn, New York, and had a panel of our designated international judges, for lack of a better term, who were from Congo, South Africa, Sierra Leone, US, etc. And we built this organization. The day following that tribunal, we initiated the creation of the African National Reparations Organization, whose sole mission would be to take the reparations demand out to the world, to hold regular tribunals. We held something like 11 or 12 tribunals, one after the other, annually, in different cities throughout the United States, to take the reparations demand out, to make it the property of the people, as opposed to the property of a handful of people who would do certain kinds of actions to try and get legislation passed, or to try and get laws passed that would give reparations. We understood that the key to this question was the mass participation. And this is the only thing that makes the reparations demand a function of the revolution. And this that we're talking about now is creating a reparations certificate that all Africans can sign, indicating their personal demand for reparations, indicating their personal, again, the ongoing process objective is to bring Africans, individuals, personal, who are out there into the process of making the reparations demand. It becomes the property of the people. And that's what the reparations certificate is all about. So someone who signs on that certificate makes them a possessor of the struggle, makes them who are complicit in the struggle, personally complicit in the struggle to win reparations. And this is what gives it its dynamic character, its revolutionary character, and takes it away from the ability of the US government, as it will do, when the crisis deepens enough, to offer up some kind of poverty program or some kind of welfare program as a substitute for reparations, calling it reparations in order to satisfy the demand coming from the masses, and appointing some specific kind of organization or some specific body of African people as those who represent the people, and signing the treaty and of the people and accepting what they will call reparations. So the certificates must be placed on our outreach tables of the party and NPW, to be signed by Africans throughout the colony who might not otherwise have an opportunity to even learn about our fight for reparations without our leadership. The certificate must also allow the people to recognize NPW as the organization they are authorizing to collect reparations for the African nation. NPW must reemphasize its work to promote our Africans Charge genocide campaign that was initiated years ago. Now that NPW has assigned a specific coordinator for the campaign, it offers us another means by which to bring countless Africans into greater national consciousness and political awareness through their activity. Thousands of Africans have already signed the online petition uniting with the campaign from throughout the world. Now we must send out NPW members and the Okay. Well, comrades, I can't even blame this disconnect to the state. It's my own ineptitude that's responsible for that. So my computer just shut down. And I was beginning to talk about the party in occupied Tanzania and the African Socialist International. In occupied Tanzania, or settler neo-colonial South Africa, the party is active in several provinces, and the Uhuru movement is growing rapidly. The current recruitment strategy being used is to bring recruits directly into infidom to minimize the previous problem of new party members being unprepared to competently carry out party roles according to party standards. We're working to fix that contradiction. And I'm not speaking specifically to occupied Tanzania, South Africa. I mean, generally speaking, the party should bring people who into our ranks who are competent to be in the ranks in the first place. So that's something we're working on. The chair of our South Africa occupied Tanzania party is Comrade Tafari, a strict African internationalist who is being prepared to take on an even greater area of responsibility for building the party in Africa. The role of South Africa in the struggle to liberate and unify Africa cannot be overstated. The so-called investment the imperialist powers made to fortify its position in Africa through the white settlers consisted of industrial development that they denied much of the rest of Africa. The African internationalists' capture of power in South Africa will expedite the transfer of development throughout the continent. It won't do it all, but it'll expedite that process. It gives us a good toehold in the process of development. Currently, the African People's Socialist Party, occupied Tanzania, is planning to initiate the regional hub economic strategy with a number of plans on the drawing board. Hopefully, with the support of Comrade Deputy Chair Zenea Chatela and her office, we will soon be able to begin production. Chairman Tafari and his team must also give, that's what I want, leave out that next paragraph. The African Socialist International is the concrete, practical expression of African internationalism. It is the practical method through which to forcibly disperse African nation. Under the leadership of its advanced detachment, its general staff assumes authority over the future of Africa and our people. The African Socialist International is the concrete, material expression of African internationalism. It is what states that African internationalism is not just an idea. It's not some abstract concept. It is the practical method through which they forcibly disperse African nation. Under the leadership of its advanced detachment, its general staff assumes authority over the future of Africa and our people. The African Socialist International is the organization of all African People's Socialist Party organizations everywhere. It is the means by which we establish a unified organization of professional revolutionaries committed to the liberation and unification of Africa everywhere Africans are located on the planet Earth. None of us ever has to fight for our liberation alone, in isolation from each other. We can unite our struggle and share lessons and experiences in fighting an imperialist enemy that is united in our exploitation. Imperialism has amassed a bounty of shared experiences in colonial domination that fills libraries of prestigious universities. The African Socialist International is the practical organizational instrument for the liberation and unification of Africa. We have to remember that every party unit everywhere in the world, including inside the US, is an active part of the African Socialist International. The ASI is the concretization of our theory of one Africa, one nation. The African Socialist International is involved in the dynamic process of actualizing the African nation. We can define the African nation because we are practically involved in consolidating it. The African nation is a revolutionary proletarian nation that will be consolidated as part of the process of overturning direct and indirect, brutish, neo-colonial political domination and vicious, life-limiting economic exploitation. It is our actual functioning organizational presence throughout the African world that gives lie to the neo-colonial inventions that are characterized as nations. The African continent has been balkanized and refashioned by European imperialists in Berlin, Germany in 1884 and 85, balkanized, split up, creating entities in so many instances, even in opposition to each other. This is what has happened to Africa. This was deliberately imposed on Africa. The result of the distribution of the partitioned Africa among themselves are the false European contrived countries that are also commonly and incorrectly called nations. So when you look at all of the African map and you see all of these borders and these names stuck on there, these are the names that white people, white power imposed on us, just like they made us Jones and made us Smith and made us Robinsons and stuff like that. They've done the same thing to Africa, and the various entities that we're looking at in Africa have been created for them, for their purposes, and not for any interest of our people. So like gods, the Europeans first invented themselves as nations, and then invented their not so immaculate African conceptions as their imperfect, distorted reflection. So like gods, the Europeans first invented themselves as nations, and then invented their not so immaculate African conception as their imperfect, distorted reflection. They created themselves, and then they created us like gods. We African internationals are the only ones who can fight for the total liberation of all Africa and all African people. We reject the self-serving European definition of the nation that was itself a product of the advent of capitalism united at the expense of the national consolidation of Africans and many others. The definition of the nation that we accept is one determined to solve the problems associated with the development of Africa and our people. It is a definition that calls for the consolidation of the African nation as a process of development, which can only occur through negation of the colonial capitalist system. Listen, I'm saying that the definition of the nation is that we accept is one that is determined to solve the problems associated with the development of Africa and our people. Now, there's some, especially petty bourgeois intellectuals, who makes the assumption that the definitions fall out of the sky, and that there must be this kind of objective definition that is not tainted by the social and political and economic interests of peoples, et cetera. But that's fanciful. There's no such thing in the world. It's impossible for such a definition to exist. The question is, who imposes that definition on societies? And the reality is those definitions are imposed on societies by those forces that have the power to do it. People define themselves, and they define themselves through their experiences and shaping who the hell they are. But when you have a force from the outside that does that, that's one of the most significant expressions of colonial domination, of a people being dominated. So it's our responsibility to say that definitions must serve us, not just any kind of definition, but certainly definition that have some kind of foundation in the science, being able to examine society, examine our place in society, and our determination to be where it is we have to go. That's what our responsibility is as people, as societies, and as revolutionaries who have assumed the responsibility for our people and for the development of our society. So we reject the false European created borders wherein the definition of the African nation is contained. We reject this in Africa, Europe, and the US, Asia, or the various territories within the Americas that came as a result of stolen indigenous land and African colonial slavery. These are imperialist serving definitions that lock Africa and the world in a permanent state of parasitic economic exploitation and political servitude. Ghana cannot fight for the total liberation and unification of Africa and our globally dispersed nation. In fact, Nkrumah, the first president of independent Ghana was clear about that. He recognized clearly that Ghana could never be free until all of Africa, he said, was free. Neither can Somalia or South Africa or Jamaica or Black Britain. At best, they can only fight for their own limited freedom and sovereignty as defined by imperialist determined assumptions of nationality. At best, they can only fight for the colonizers' definition of our freedom within the colonizers' constructed reality. As African internationalists, we do not respect the borders created by our oppressors for the purpose of dividing us and our Africa to facilitate the theft of our resources. We are Africans, and Africa is ours. Africa for Africans at home and abroad, the slogan demand advanced by Marcus Garvey more than 100 years ago, resonates today, even with greater alacrity among African internationalists who are 21st century Garveyites. We fight for Africa wherever we are, whether on the African continent, in Amsterdam, or Mississippi, USA. This is the practical application of African internationalism. African nationality is made real because African internationalists make it real. Whatever lesser identities we have as a people, our primary guiding identity is African. The African nation is where we are, and we are everywhere. African internationalists recognize our responsibility to define ourselves as a part of the struggle for our liberation. We define ourselves, that's a part of the struggle for liberation. The imperialists, the white colonial capitalists claim their own national identity. And in the process of defining themselves, they define Africans as the necessary antipode to give their self-identity validity. So their validity, their self-identity is validated by us being who they say we are. African internationalism tells us that we have the responsibility to define ourselves as part of the struggle for our liberation. Our identity is made real by us and the African Socialist International. The ASI deploys the advanced detachment, the vanguard of African liberation and the African working class throughout the African world, on and off colonial continental Africa. The African Socialist International is the practical political instrument for establishing the African nation wherever we are. We are not some imperialist defined creation. We are not hyphenated white people. We are not a portion of the territorial US South. We are not people of color. We are Africans, and we are Africa. Is relate to Africa. We are Africans because we say we are. Early last year, the leader of our party in neo-colonial South Africa, or occupied Azania, Kamet Tafari, addressed this understanding in the plan of action for advancing our party work there in South Africa. It is a clear demonstration of the nation building project when under the leadership of African internationalists, and from the plan of action, we quote, "The African Socialist International functions from a standpoint that clarifies science from philosophical idealism, which is a much needed dichotomy to draw up in occupied Azania, because South Africa has removed African people from political life and given our people an ideological basis for faith in imperialism, given Africans in South Africa the impression that other African people outside of this border are different from us. And in fact, that Africans in this border are not Africans, but some kind of people gracefully making the white man's burden easier by not being tied to Africa and African people above this false national identity. The rainbow nation, yeah. The importance of studying African internationalism on the continent helped us to see that it is not important to Africanize the countries like the Pan-Africanists suggest, that it is not worth the effort to be some kind of Azanian instead of South Africans. This happened in Rhodesia. It's now Zimbabwe, but the African working class still lives in Rhodesia. The conditions never change, just the same. So African internationalism has designated the borders we are in as an impediment to African unity and development under the leadership of the working class, thus prompting us to see that the real South Africans are really the ones who stole our land and dispersed our people through slavery. African internationalism has shown us that Africa is more important than the artificial states built atop our Africa, meaning South Africa is a cancer on the body of Mother Africa. We define the African nation in my political report to the Sixth Congress published as an uneasy equilibrium. We made a scientifically based African serving definition. We concluded that the definition of the nation is not just a purely abstract academic issue. We maintain that our conditions of existence today revolve around this critical question of the African nation and the nation in general. And here's a quote. The material conditions Africa suffered worldwide have their origin in the attack on Africa that led to the capture of our national homeland and our people. Our poverty and susceptibility to ignorance, violence, and material want throughout the world, including in the US, UK, and the rest of Europe, result from the material conditions of existence in Africa since its capture and partition. We also, unquote, we also make the further point in this excerpt of what we mean by the African nation. Quote, the African nation then is a community of people whose core identity is based on historical ties to the equatorial continent of Black Africa, contributing to a common culture, history, and physiognomy. The African nation is also comprised of all those African people who have been forcibly dispersed to various places in the world through colonial slavery. Dispersed Africans were part of the process of the development of capitalism and the European nation, a process that requires our subjugation and national incoherence. Additionally, the African nation is comprised of many who experience a sense of sameness, a subjective connection to Africa, mainly because of skin color that helps to define their imperialist-inspired, impoverished, and oppressed state of existence. The Dalit in India, the indigenous of Australia, and other areas where the African presence goes back to earliest times, such as in the Asia-Pacific region, are included in this category. Finally, the African nation can include people of other nationalities living in Africa who commit national suicide, becoming part of the African working class, and abandoning all allegiance to a predatory colonial relationship to African people. The truth, stated simply, is we are Africans, whatever else we may be called, because we say we are Africans, and we feel like we are Africans. Africa is the national homeland of all Black people worldwide. It is the land to which the identity of the African nation is firmly and irreversibly affixed. Our historical connection to Africa represents the critical element in the material basis for African nationality. For although we have been forcibly dispersed by colonial slavery and related factors subsequent to the initial European attack on Africa, our current conditions of existence, both in Africa and abroad, are essentially defined by the consequences of our forced dispersal, unquote. We say, our party is the architect of the African nation under construction. We are this not only because we say we are, but because we are also the construction workers. Our revolutionary political work is organizing the forcibly dispersed African nation to active participation in creating the future for Africa and the world in which we will live. We are negating the hundreds-year-old life and liberty-depriving imperialist reality through construction of its antipode. This is the relationship of theory to practice. This is the relationship of theory to practice that must be understood, especially during this time of existential crisis of imperialism. Vanguard Up has practical significance at this moment. I just want to say this, comrades, that this is a really important paragraph I just read, because there are many people who are in the party who are ready to take on the practical aspects of making this revolution, and that's very good. Practice is primary. But like we said, practice without theory is blind. And like theory without practice is meaningless. So what we really want to win among our ranks, and sometimes among some of our very best forces, that you must become African internationalists, which means that understanding the theory is important. Understand the tactics and strategy of revolution is important. Revolution is a science, and that's different from picking up a gun in and of itself or going out to fight. Revolution presupposes, when it's most effective, an understanding of the social system that you are fighting in and against. It presupposes, if you know how that thing works, what makes it work. It's not just guns that make it work. If it was simply guns, then it would be over tomorrow. But it's more than that. It's the will of the people. It's the nature of the society. What makes it tick? Can you undermine it? Can you engage in an ongoing protracted struggle when protracted struggle is necessary to contribute to the disintegration of the system? That's the thing that's going to make the gun effective and strategically possible. You contribute to the disintegration of the system, socially, politically, economically, and this, you can contribute to the system losing confidence in itself, unable and unwilling to say that its rule is permanent and is just. This is what a part of the revolutionary strategy has to contribute to. And this is what we must understand. We must understand what it is we're trying to do. And yes, we are trying to make Black Power blueprint real and bring economic development to the African community there, but that can't happen without an offensive that's consistent, that is continual against the colonizer and colonialism itself. So you can be expeditious, you can be really brilliant in doing some kinds of things, but that must be consciously connected to the process of disintegration that's necessary for us to make revolution real. Because there are many people who are out there who think in terms of being prepared. You know, we've met them almost all the time doing this work, you know, call me when you're ready to pick up the gun, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It doesn't work like that. Just somebody willing to pick up a gun, and we have too much of that in the whole world among Black people. What is the objective of everything we do? How does this contribute to the destruction of a social system that the gun is a part of trying to maintain? In fact, at the juncture that they have to pick up the gun, then they reveal to us the fragility of the relationships of production, the fragility of these relationships that exist. It's glaring testimony that the thing won't work. It cannot work unless they stand over us with guns. And so that's not a sign of their strength. It's an evidence of their weakness that they are exposing to us on a regular basis. But their weakness means not just because they stand with guns, clearly they got guns. Their weakness is in the nature of the system itself. We understand that, then we're continuously hitting the system. We're continuously doing everything that can. We have strategies that are designed to weaken it on a regular basis. And weakening it is not simply picking up a gun. Sometimes the picking up the gun is well, anytime picking up the gun is a strategical objective. There are strategies. There's a strategy that's tied to that. And there's a science to revolution. Revolution is a science and an art. You don't make it just because you're mad, just because you want to, just because you're scared. That's why it's a protracted thing, because imperialism and colonialism itself imposes on us great dangers all the time on our communities, starves us and it does other kinds of things. So you have to have a strategical approach that informs any kind of tactic, any kind of thing that you're doing at any given moment. It must contribute to the strategic objective we've established for winning our liberation as a whole. Doesn't mean that the spontaneous activities that people make cannot contribute to facilitating the objective that we have, and doesn't mean that we won't initiate actions and what have you that are designed to do just that. But it does mean that that theory must inform our practice if it's going to be revolutionary practice, as opposed to simply striking out, you know, at the oppressor. So we're talking about a nation under construction. We say our party is the architect of the African nation under construction. We are this not only because we say we are, but because we are also the construction workers. Our revolutionary political work is organizing the forcible dispersed African nation to active participation in creating the future for Africa and the world in which we will live. We are negating the 100-year-old life and liberty depriving imperialist reality through construction of its antipode. We are negating that. We are constantly involved in doing that. That is important. That is significant. We must understand that. We're saying how we are doing that. This is the relationship of theory to practice that must be understood, especially during this time of the existential crisis of imperialism. Vanguard Up has practical significance at this moment. We recognize that the African reality we are constructing must be done in the process of solving a myriad of political contradictions, not the least of which is the imperialist domination of Africa, especially in Africa through the neo-colonialism that Kwame Nkrumah warned us about. The struggle against neo-colonialism is fundamental to genuine African liberation, unification, and development. On May 23rd, 1963, 57 years ago when this was written, Ghana President Kwame Nkrumah made what was probably his most important political presentation in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, at the founding member meeting of the misnamed Organization of African Unity. Nkrumah spoke of the contradictions confronting African liberation, that it has been left to the African People's Socialist Party to resolve, and that this plenary will reiterate. Here's a short excerpt from Nkrumah's presentation, which is titled, "We Must Unite Now or Perish," and we're quoting Nkrumah. On this African continent, it has not taken us long to discover that the struggle against colonialism does not end with the attainment of national independence. Independence is only the prelude to a new and more involved struggle for the right to conduct our own economic and social affairs, to construct our society according to our aspirations, unhampered by crushing and humiliating neo-colonialist controls and interference. From the start, we have been threatened with frustration where rapid change is imperative, and with instability where sustained effort and order rule are indispensable. No sporadic act nor pious resolution can resolve our present problems. Nothing will be of avail except the united act of a united Africa. We have already reached the stage where we must unite or sink into that condition which has made Latin America the unwilling and distressed prey of imperialism after 1.5 centuries of political independence. As a continent, we have emerged from independence in a different age, with imperialism growing stronger, more ruthless and experienced, and more dangerous in its international associations. Our economic advancement demands the end of colonialist and neo-colonialist domination in Africa. Our economic advancement demands the end of colonialist and neo-colonialist domination in Africa. But just as we understood that the shaping of our national destinies required of each of us our political independence and bent all our strength to this attainment, so we must recognize that our economic independence resides in our African Union and requires the same concentration upon the political achievement. The unity of our continent, no less than our separate independence, will be delayed if indeed we do not lose it by hobnobbing with colonialism. African unity is above all a political kingdom, which can only be gained by political means. The social and economic development of Africa will come only within the political kingdom and not the other way around. You're not going to get the social and economic development unless you win political power. It's a statement. Nkrumah's admonition at the OAU founding were generally unheeded at the time. The neo-colonialism that Nkrumah defined and fought so hard to defy was actually consolidated on a continental basis at that OAU founding meeting that was hijacked by the wishes and machinations of parasitic imperialist predators. It was the meeting that codified the unity and progress of prohibiting colonial borders our party, like Nkrumah before us, is determined to eradicate. Unlike Nkrumah, however, we have the African People's Socialist Party, the advanced detachment of the African working class, and the organizational vehicle through which this is being accomplished. Also, unlike Nkrumah at the time, we know that true liberation and unification of Africa and Africans will not occur as the achievement of neo-colonial heads of state, but of our revolutionary party based in the African working class. The opportunist neo-colonialist that functions as an agent of imperialism, as white power and blackface, must be removed with finality if the misery of our people is to be ended and Africa and our people are ever to be free and prosperous. Uhuru. Thank you, Comrade. I know that I'm a few minutes over, but I wanted to get to this portion. Thank you. Comrade Akile.
Uhuru, Chairman. Well, thank you. Thank you so much for this incredible study. Very powerful, and just, yeah, really appreciate it. We do have lots of questions coming in, lots of comments. We will be taking a question from last week, but before we get into the question and answer portion, I do want to acknowledge where people are watching from. We have with us San Diego, California, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, Oakland, California, St. Petersburg, Florida, Los Angeles, California, Amsterdam, St. Louis, Missouri, Greenville, North Carolina, Chicago, Illinois, Huntsville, Alabama, Bermuda, Brooklyn, New York, Irvington, New Jersey, Boston, Massachusetts, Lakeland, Florida, Richmond, Virginia, Fort Wayne, Indiana, Kingston, New York, Kuwait, Detroit, Michigan, Surrey, United Kingdom, Falkville, South Africa, occupied Azania, Hempstead, New York, Detroit, Michigan, Wichita, Kansas, Washington, D.C., Columbia, Missouri, and Atlanta, Georgia. So, Uhuru, comrades, thank you for tuning in, whether you're watching on Facebook or YouTube. So, Chairman, we're going to take this question that came last week in last week's study from Daryl Antoine. And Daryl did not say where he was from, but he asked this question on Facebook last week. Uhuru, Chairman, I appreciate what I have learned from you over the past few months. I am not a member of the party, but am a student of the party's philosophy and of the Uhuru movement. After 47 years of the organization's existence, how do you account for the size of the organization and how unpopular the party is among the masses of Africans in America and abroad? I understand how criticism is crucial for improvement. What criticisms do you have of the organization's leadership to account for its unpopular character among the masses?
Comrade Darren, you studied us for a couple of months, and I'm glad. That's really important. And I just want to say that obviously that we have a lot of self-criticism. You hear them, this political report that I'm doing, the one that I'm working on is replete with self-criticism in terms of errors and contradictions that that we experience as a party. But the size of our party is not one of them. And I don't know how you know what the size of our party is. We've never published that. We never do. And but what we do is show that despite the size of our party, which we admittedly say is a relatively small organization, despite the size of our party, you see that our involvement with masses of the people who you say somehow with whom we are unpopular, you see our participation, all of it, revolves around the participation of the people. It's not just something that we come here and talk about. What we talk about is activity and stuff we involve with the people in every instance. We even involved in political campaigns, running candidates for office and what have you, that requires the participation of the people. And the other thing is that when you say unpopular among the masses of the people, compared to what? Compared to the organization that you don't join, as I understand it, at one time you may have been working with APDEP, I'm not sure, or some other entity that that the movement is involved in. And if that's the case, you need to explain how you distinguish yourself from the people. If the masses are somehow we're unpopular with the masses, are you the masses? Are you one of the masses? Are you some observer of the masses, some clinician who stands above the fray? Can you define yourself? Is your participation and your studying us for months an example of the popularity of the party among the masses? Are you so separate from the masses that your participation is somehow exceptionalized? I just don't understand the question as an honest question and an honest discussion, but I felt like it was necessary to speak to it. In terms of the size of our party, it's precisely because one aspect of that relates precisely to the sizes, to the science and politics of our party, that it would be small. We are a party of the advanced detachment. Everybody can't come into the party who wants to come into the party. It's not a mass organization. NPDOM is a mass organization that we've created. And it's active in various places around the world, just like the party is active in various places around the world. And ANWO is an organization for African women that we've created, and it is a party of the organization. So I just don't understand the question, the intent of the question. And if you're saying, are we self-critical that we have not done as much as we want to do, as we think should happen, that's true. And that is reflected in almost every political report that we put forward. In the process of engaging with the masses, then we sum up our success in doing that. And we're self-critical that we don't do that as effectively. But I think that if you are going to ask that kind of question, you have to say as compared to what? As compared to this organization, as compared to an idea that you have in your head about what that should look like, as compared to the organizations or people that didn't suffer the brutal counterinsurgency that destroyed the Black Revolution of the 1960s. You have to say more than what you said, comrade. And if you studied us for the months that you talked about, you would know that is the case. So I don't know. I mean, I guess I'm not effective in answering your question. And perhaps my inability on this end contributes to how you would understand our unpopularity with the masses. And I'm hoping that you do consider yourself one of the masses. Otherwise, yeah, it's difficult to understand the question. Uhuru.
Uhuru, Chairman, thank you. Absolutely. Unite with that. And that was all the questions that we missed from last week. So we will go into this week's questions. And I think with this question, you're actually going to answer a couple of people's questions. A lot of people have asked this exact question in the comment section today. So I'm not sure if you heard about the arrest of the INFAC leader, Grandmaster Jay, but people want to know what your thoughts, your views on that are. And someone asked a specific question: can it be used as a rallying point?
I think that this is a really important question and a really important issue. I intend to speak to this on Wednesday during the live that we'll do on Wednesday. But it is really important. This arrest of this man, this comrade, is it's a signature action that's been taken by the imperialists. And so, yeah, it's something that we'll talk on. And I do think it's extremely important. I think it's an assault on any manifestation of significance, perceived significance by our rulers of independent action that contributes to smashing this notion of pacifism and nonviolence, and that has been imposed on our struggle in the 1950s, and that was finally destroyed by the Black Revolution of the 60s, when the movement decided at that time now to these thugs who act as unofficial arms of the state. Now, in order to get something, you're going to have to bring something. And so the 1960s saw the emergence of a revolution and the emergence of armed struggle as a viable component of that. In fact, as the critical component of that. So it was the government, the United States government, the same government that just charged this comrade and threw him in prison, that killed and destroyed those who had concluded that there's no way out of this except through armed struggle. And so this example, and I would point to the bombing of the MOVE forces in 1985, anything that broke from that. So the objective here is to crush it and to give full sway only to pacifists and those who would deny the legitimacy of armed struggle as a means not only of self-defense, and that's all Grandmaster Jay talked about. You got to remember, at one time, the Black Panther Party was called the Black Panther Party for Self-Defense. It understood shortly thereafter that the limitations of just a movement for self-defense, as someone once said, that in a war of national liberation, any struggle made by the oppressed is self-defense. It doesn't matter, it's all self-defense. Sometimes the individual actions of somebody who will pick up a gun and chase a cop or pick up a brick is self-defense. Colonialism is a permanent violence imposed on our people. So yeah, we think it's extremely important what has happened with Grandmaster Jay, and this falls also in the wake of the determination to characterize independent, pro-independence, any kind of activity by Black people as some kind of identity extremism and some kind of domestic terrorism. So yeah, we think it's important. I'll be speaking some more about that on Wednesday. Uhuru.
Uhuru, thank you, Chairman. And I will give the details about the Wednesday's live at the end of the study. Yeah, like I said, multiple people posed that question.
Good, good.
Our next question comes from Comrade Nasir in Kuwait.
Let me just say this, you know, our enemies without the colonizer would have us as belly crawling lick spittle, too timid, too afraid. They even create these images for us. It used to be obvious in all the movies and what have you, the African would be always afraid, rolling our eyes and running and whatever. That's the image that they create for themselves. That helps to pump them up to be the tough guys in our communities and what have you. And that every white person who's in the police department or the military has grown up with that image of Black people and other oppressed people. And sometimes we are too. We are taught to be afraid. We are taught to be fearful. We are taught to regard our life as less significant than the life of our oppressors. And so any action, any philosophy, any kind of evidence coming from the colonized of disregarding or opposing that view of African people is a crime. And it's even characterized as terrorism, you know, because anything that frightens the white man is terror. And nothing frightens a white man more than slave uprising, than the colonized people who feeds, clothes himself and his family and have done so for centuries. Nothing frightens that white man more than African people standing up for our liberation and all the other oppressed peoples around the world. Uhuru.
Uhuru, Chairman, thank you for that addition. Our next question is coming from Comrade Nasir in Kuwait, and he asks, what are the chairman's thoughts on criticism that the language of revolutionaries is offensive, that it's not a way to win friends and influence people?
Well, I don't know. I haven't heard. I guess I do hear that. I guess when people say, when you say the language of the revolution is offensive, I don't know what language, you know, specifically Comrade Nasir, because some people who use certain language, I don't find it revolutionary at all. I do find a lot of stuff offensive, and I think that's its design. I think the imperialists, I think the state, the government, in fact, will even put people in organizations and create organizations that's supposed to be for freedom that masses of our people will find offensive. What do you call it? It's a provocation. It's you know, that they would throw into the mix. And sometimes they've actually created organizations. There was one once in Tampa, led by a white guy who was supposed to be this ultra communist, et cetera, that used language and took actions and it's like agent provocateurs who were, that's what their task is. That's part of a counterinsurgency ploy to make revolution something that is unpopular to masses of the people. Now, if that's the kind of language that you're talking about, I do think it's a disservice. And sometimes people who are not conscious and actively part of the counterinsurgency would do that. I know of organizations, I know of so-called leaders who are obscene, literally obscene, and consciously and purposefully obscene, and who intend to draw into their ranks obscenity influence and obscenity loving forces. So that happens. That's not revolution. That's counter-revolution. That's opposed to revolution. That's the kind of thing the U.S. government actually pays people to do to push people away from revolution. So that, we're certainly opposed to. Now, if there are issues of people not understanding what is being said, that if, for example, one of the things that has happened just recently, you saw the Trump administration equating the Democratic Party with socialist. And that's based on the great hatred that has they pumped over in the early part, in the 60s and what have you, and 50s and 60s, this whole Red Scare, frightening people, the communists are going to eat your babies and things like that, which was the real enemy to Black Power. Then Black Power was going to eat your babies and stuff, so that Trump says socialism, and everybody who's tied to the electoral process and they're trying to win within that context, you see them getting frightened by the concept of socialism. And so that happens. So you say, aren't people going to turn away from it? That's never happened. That's really never happened. We do work every day in the African community under the most horrific circumstances. We've never run into the working people who are saying that you call yourself socialists, we hate socialism. That's only the petty bourgeoisie. That's only those forces who intend to succeed within the electoral, within the existing social system. Those who are fighting to destroy it, who know that we have to win masses of people in order to make this happen. We are not forces who will go out intentionally trying to offend the masses, even though sometimes we have to take unpopular position. We took an unpopular position around Mandela. We took an unpopular position around this guy, Barack Hussein Obama. And we took an unpopular position with some people around Biden and with Clinton, et cetera. That's going to happen. And it's our responsibility, of course, to educate masses of people. But you know what? With the exception of Obama, when we talk about Clinton, Biden, and the rest of them, you didn't see that kind of response from Black people. Oh, you shouldn't say that about them. They talked the lesser of two evils talk. But Obama, of course, was different. And because what Obama did, he played upon the incipient nationalism in the African community. So Black people supported Obama because he was Black. He was a part of the African nation, and they thought that was a departure from what was happening to us when white power acted in its own face. So they used Obama to disguise themselves. And so to some extent, masses of African workers were offended because we said something about Obama. But generally speaking, if you talk about this need to actually be offensive, and then that's not revolutionary action. That's counter-revolutionary action. So I hope I spoke to it, Comrade Nasir. Uhuru.
Uhuru, thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Comrade Nasir. And yeah, just let us know if that was clarifying for you. But thank you so much, Chairman. Our next question comes from Comrade Matsamela in San Diego, California. Matsamela asks, Chairman, considering the teachings of Kwame Nkrumah, in what ways may we see this concession of some cities and institutions to produce what they term as reparations, though we know it's not true reparations, as a representation of the uneasy equilibrium of colonialism?
Well, I'm trying to connect the Nkrumah. What did you say about how, considering what about Nkrumah, the philosophy you say?
Considering the teachings of Kwame Nkrumah, in what ways may we see the concession of some cities and institutions to produce what they term as reparations?
Okay, I'm not sure. I can speak to an aspect of it, I think, with some kind of certainty of what's being conveyed here. That this uneasy equilibrium. Why all of a sudden, when we first started talking about the reparations work, even the white liberals considered us a part of a lunatic fringe. It's the work that the party did in really pushing the reparations issue out among masses of people, not only in this country, but Africans throughout Europe and parts of Africa were introduced to the reparations demand as a consequence of the party, which doesn't mean that it wasn't out there before, but I'm just saying in terms of massifying that issue, it was something that the party took on as a mission of our own. And the power of the reparations demand is something that always influenced us. Because we know that at the point that Africans can grapple with the issue of reparations, it affects the consciousness, the mass consciousness of Black people, so that the ability of the colonizer to put the onus of responsibility on the colonized, those of us who have been victimized and sucked dry, to the colonizer loses his ability to talk about how charitable he is and how he's exhausted, through giving to Black people living off the welfare of white people. You hear this all the time. Trump inferred it. Reagan talked about it. Welfare queens and all of them, every one of them. They're going to do something to help the poor Negroes. That kind of thing. But at the moment Africans grasp this issue of reparations, then they grapple with the question of why we are poor. And it's not that they are not doing us a favor with welfare. They've lived off our welfare for 400 years, and this is something that becomes, really powerful. And to the extent that this is occurring, that people are beginning to see aspects of the system and actually the root of the power of the system, even if they may not understand that at the moment. So you would see middle-class Negroes who can now jump on board with the reparations demand, who may have already been on board, to tell you the truth, and various other masses, people talking about reparations and introducing it into the public spaces, and people who now run for office, because they're doing this because they know masses of people are now gravitating toward this recognition of this relationship. And it's a problem for the imperialists, that this recognition of this relationship. And it hasn't always been a problem. It's a growing problem, because growing numbers of Black people are doing this, and people who they promote as great authors and thinkers and what have you are saying reparations. People who run for political office are saying reparations. And this is their attempt to get in front of that question. The bourgeoisie, sectors of the ruling class, want to get in front of that question. Then there are sectors of our African population who talk about reparations. The guy who used to own BET or something to that effect called for $14 trillion, et cetera. I mean, when the hell did he join the reparations movement? But the masses begin to make this push this issue. And it's something that they can visualize possibly happening. Then you got the petty bourgeois hustlers who jump right onto it. And this happened a long time ago. I saw somebody who wanted a long time ago in the when was this? The 1980s, 70s or 80s. We were engaged in a struggle with this great leader who was trying to win Black people to reparation because you might need your teeth fixed or to get your house painted or something to that effect, or who told the US government that you should give us reparations because we can really use the money and we can use the money to fight drugs, in the communities and things like that, So you find opportunists, hustlers, and everything pushing the question. And the more the question is pushed, then the more the door is open to genuine revolutionaries who work among the people, who do not rely on Congress, who do not rely on the president, who do not rely on the court, but rely on the people, mobilize the people, put the people in motion around this question. So now they're having to deal with it because it is a deepening crisis of the social system itself. It is an uneasy equilibrium. And we want it to go all the way. And you know what would take it all the way? Is when masses of African people understand that your refrigerator is empty because that somebody across the tracks have the food for yourself and your children in it, that you don't have clean water because they got clean water. They have clean water at your expense. They have resources at your expense. This is the thing that gives energy to the revolutionary movement and takes this uneasy equilibrium. This struggle between the past and the future is the past that robbed us. It's the past of colonialism that robs us and bleeds us, et cetera. And it's the future of humanity that will be realized with the struggle to destroy that past and emancipate the colonized and the working peoples of the world. Uhuru. I hope that was helpful, coming, Masamela. Thank you for the question.
Uhuru. Yes, thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Matsamela. And he commented that Nkrumah says we can see neocolonialism as a reflection of a dying colonialism. We can see these bourgeois ideas of reparations as a sign of a dying colonialism.
It's dying.
Dying.
Yeah.
Uhuru.
Yeah, dying but not yet dead.
Not yet dead. Uhuru. So our next question comes from his username is The Last African on YouTube. And I don't know if you've heard about this, Chairman, but he asked, could you please address the comments of the Nigerian president at the massacre of 43 farmers? I'm not sure if you've heard about that recently.
No, I didn't hear. I don't think I heard about that. But I'm glad that you introduced the issue of Nigeria into this discussion. Nigeria is a critically significant territory. As we know, it was a British colony. Its geographical configuration was pulled together by England. Its the political and social character was defined by England in this whole struggle for imperialism. It's even called the name by England, and it's a very seriously complicated. Well, that's not that complicated. You got neo-colonial power in Nigeria, just like you have all over Africa. These are puppet regimes, and they sit on top of the oppression of our people in general. They do. But also the Nigerian project itself. That is to say, the creation of this entity that has no basis in history. When I say no basis in history, I mean this as it's configured, this relationship that they've imposed on Black people with this creature of England, this Frankenstein monster. In fact, if you look at the borders of Africa, that's what you see, these stitchings by Europe, like it's something that they've created and put together, et cetera, for their benefit. That's Nigeria. And in Nigeria, where there's so billions and trillions of dollars have been extracted from Nigeria and is extracted from Nigeria daily. Shell oil companies and other corporations like that, they have their own armies, their own military forces in Nigeria. And you're talking about the so-called AFRICOM that is there and all over the continent of Africa to protect this relationship. So the Nigerian entity is a false entity. It's a one that was imposed on us, and they use all kinds of violence. They don't just use the violence of the Nigerian military or police inside Nigeria. They have used the Nigerian troops as entities to go into other countries and crush and resistance, et cetera, in the name of being some kind of Organization of African Unity or African Union peacekeeping group paid for by the best peacekeepers in the world, right? The United States and European imperialists, these Negroes work for them. They work for them all the time. And so massacres are absolutely necessary to maintain this relationship that white power has with us. It's always necessary. Just 2 days ago, or 3 days ago, within the last 2 or 3 days, in St. Petersburg, Florida, where I'm located, the police killed a young African man. They shot him, I think, 37 times or something like that. 30, and they didn't kill him for killing a cop, for raping a white woman, for planning to poison somebody or to depose the president or anything like that. They didn't kill him for that. They said that he didn't stop when they tried to stop him. That the proverbial, the ongoing thing is that he tried to run us over or something like that. Therefore, we had to shoot him 37 times with a cop standing on top of a car, shooting into his body and what have you. This is the way, that massacres and murder and mayhem is part of what the whole colonialism is about. It can't function without that. So what we have in Nigeria, like we have all these so-called countries in Africa, managers of white power. These are the interests, the property, the resources of white people. They own our Africa, just like they've owned our people, and they have done this for hundreds of years. And so they have these managers who will carry out their will, their wishes. And of course, the managers themselves and their cousins, their families, and their ethnic group sometimes, or other expressions of the class benefit from this too. So they get a part of the action. But what we've always said, that that imperialism, the empire, colonialism will allow individuals to succeed. It's just the people that they won't allow to succeed. And individuals can succeed, from the colonizers can only succeed at the expense of the people. And these Negroes would lose their jobs as heads of state in Nigeria if they allowed the people to challenge Shell, if they allowed the people to challenge all these the other interests of white power there. They would lose their jobs. They would be overthrown. They would be crushed, and they know it. And so they massacre us in order to maintain this relationship they have with white power. So I'm not, and Nigeria is an excellent example of that. Again, it's not just there in that false territory, those contrived borders that they've created to suck our resources, but not that entity that they've created that they call the Nigerian government expresses itself as violence all across the continent of Africa and various places in West Africa in particular, at the behest and in the service of white power, Uhuru. So Lord, so last African, yeah.
For real. I thank you so much for that answer, Chairman, and thank you, the last African on YouTube, for asking the question. We have about 10 minutes left, Chairman, and we still have a lot of questions. But
I'll take the criticism. Go ahead.
No, we of course we'll most likely have to get to some next week. But the next question comes from Comrade Hennock in Bermuda, and he asks, Uhuru Chairman, please expound, is Pan-Africanism the same as African internationalism?
Pan-Africanism and African internationalism have nothing in common. African internationalism is a theory. It is a theory that has born out of a scientific explanation that shows the origin of the capitalist social system itself and how it came about as our expense and what it's going to take to win our liberation. It is a theory that recognizes that Africans as one people dispersed around the world with a common objective. It is a theory that recognizes that there can be no freedom for Black people any place on the planet Earth without a major assault to liberate and unite Africa and the African nation under the leadership of its advanced detachment, under the leadership of the African working class. Pan-Africanism is whatever the ones who call themselves Pan-Africanists want to call it. Some will say Pan-Africanism is some kind of struggle to unite Africa under scientific socialism. Some will, but at the same time, they don't denounce the Pan-Africanists who clearly are working for capitalism, like Museveni and Uganda, who's made the news now for reasons that's important to imperialists who are concerned that his rule there is becoming less effective in dominating Africa and playing the role that Uganda plays in Congo and playing the role in keeping the masses subdued in Uganda. And there's ongoing resistance in Uganda, from the Lord's Resistance Army, groups that were born out of initially opposition to the neo-colonial rule that was there. So Pan-Africanism is completely different, and active and dynamic Pan-Africanism got its start, political Pan-Africanism, as an attack on the Garvey movement, as an actual ploy, and the NAACP, the United States NAACP, under the leadership in this instance, this mission of W.E.B. Du Bois, who put forth a whole talented 10th kind of strategy for a neo-colonial rule of Black people by the talented 10% of the educated and upper-class Black people in this country. So it was created as an attack on Garvey, and its philosophical assumptions are wrong, its tactics are wrong, its tactics resulted in so many people either being killed or overthrown because they were not prepared for making the struggle against imperialism and for complete, total capture of our resources and the significance of the working class in that place. So is entirely different. We are socialists. We are the communists. We are the revolutionaries. We are the representatives of the working class. We are those who recognize that fundamental aspect of our struggle is in the process of liberating Africa and African people is the need for having a single revolutionary organization of the kind that Marcus Garvey created, that W.E.B. Du Bois and the Pan-Africanist movement did everything they could to destroy.
Thank you, Chairman. And that question again came from Comrade Hennock.
Comrade Hennock, that's not the same as saying that all the people who call themselves Pan-Africanists are these things. Because what happened was when the US government, before the destruction of the Garvey movement, you had the Pan-Africanists of Du Bois and the Garvey movement existing in the same time frame. And the Garvey movement had millions of people attached to it, and there were only a handful of people who were attached to the Pan-Africanist movement. And that's literally true until 1945. With the Manchester conference, the Pan-Africanist conference, you only saw a handful of petty bourgeois intellectuals from the United States and other places in the world who worked hand in glove and bragged about it with a colonizer who led this movement. So with the destruction of the Garvey movement, then the Pan-Africanist thing seemed to be the only thing that represented uniting all Black people around the world. And because people were not clear on the role that the petty bourgeoisie, the neo-colonists, the Du Bois and his force played in destroying the Garvey movement, the role that the Pan-Africanist movement played in destroying the Garvey movement, now the Pan-Africanists seem to be the only thing that you can join to carry out the mission. In fact, Amy Jock Garvey participated in 1945 in the Pan-Africanist Congress that happened in Manchester, England, and she said she was there to further the work of her husband. And so so masses of people joined it because they didn't know about African internationalism. And so Hennock, that's part of what you're doing there in Bermuda, and is helping the people understand African internationalism is the only viable alternative to the oppression that we experience as a people globally. Uhuru.
Uhuru. All right, Chairman. So I'm gonna take one last question. I'm gonna take Comrade Kumba's question in St. Louis. Kumba asks, Uhuru Chairman, do you have an analysis of Front, I guess, Polisario, Western Sahara, also the struggles in Ethiopia?
Well, first of all, let me just say that Ethiopia, this is a hell of a experience that we're seeing in Ethiopia. Ethiopia too has played really important role as a tool of U.S. imperialism, and sending troops into places like Somalia and what have you at the behest and service of U.S. imperial white power, so Ethiopia has played a role in that. And the fact is that there is no revolutionary government in Ethiopia. One thing that continues to happen is that as long as these borders are there, separating and defining who we are as a people, you will have a situation like the Tigray people who at one juncture played a real dominant force in Ethiopian politics, and who seem to be, because of its dominant role, able to play a leading role in sending Ethiopian troops in Somalia and other places to working for U.S. imperialism, and also exacerbating the contradiction between the Ethiopian state and Eritrea. And so what has happened, it seems, is that the significance and power of the Tigray movement has been undermined by the existing Ethiopian government, and so they've made a struggle in defiance of the government in the Tigray region, so that's what we have. We have this contest going on between these different sectors who really engaged in a struggle around the authenticity and legitimacy of the borders that exist there, that in Ethiopia, and who should have power, and a situation that we're still locked into ethnic strife and struggle because we have not achieved a national consciousness. As I say, we are all Africans in the first place, and and that's our primary definition, not Oromo, not Tigrayan, or any other ethnics that live inside that territory. That's going to take the African Revolution and African Socialist International to resolve it. It's not going to resolve it. It's not going to happen automatically and independently of that. So it's an all-round struggle that has to be involved. And then, so the other question had to do with which, other than it was Ethiopia on the Polisario front. Yeah, I can't say that much about the Polisario front. I met them in Moscow a few years ago. I met them in Moscow, and they've been involved in a struggle there for some time now. And they're located in the Sahara, in the area of the Sahara region that has initially was dominated, if I'm not mistaken, by Spain. I think it was Spain. And I think that it may have been Morocco that assumed authority over that territory. Again, we're just looking at these artificial borders that have been created by the imperialists, and that's been put in the possession of an elite sector from the African population who serves the interests of imperialism. And each time you have these forces fighting in their own interest, the people suffer from that. So I don't know that much really about the Polisario Front. I used to know much more when they were more in front of us in the 1960s, in terms of late 60s, in terms of being seeing them represented in the overall liberation struggle. They fell off the radar for a long period of time, and then there was this capture of some territory in the Sahara, and by this Polisario Front. And I can't say much more than that, Comrade Kumba. I bet you know the answer to that question, though. Uhuru.
Uhuru, thank you, Chairman, and thank you to Comrade Kumba. So that brings us to the end, Chairman, if you want to give us some closing statements before we go into our announcements.
No, I just think that's really important. I don't know if it was passed on to you. Did anybody talk to you, Comrade Director, about the Panther Cub? The Panther Cubs, they have produced some really important kinds of, like this watch. This is a watch that's Fred Hampton is the picture on this watch. They got one with Malcolm X with the gun. They've done other kinds of things in terms of buttons, free the Panther, and political paraphernalia, Che Guevara buttons, etc., with much of the money going to some of the money anyway, going to free political prisoners. So I just think that it's important that we'll try to make that part of our messages so that we can call on people to support it, to get the kinds of memorabilia that they are promoting, so that it can give support to these political prisoners. And I just want to say that this shirt, I don't know if you can see it, but it's got the big star on it, you know. Yeah, this is something that was sent to me by Comrade Sobek out of LA, and I like it. And so I just want to, yeah, that's it. We have a lot of work to do, comrades, and you know, every day the significance of the African People's Socialist Party is made glaringly clear to me. And so we have a lot of work to do, and that's in part the significance of this discussion that we're having on today. The study that we're doing is to try to arm us to make this revolution, to take our people out of this hellish situation that has been imposed on us for the last 600 years. Uhuru.
Uhuru, thank you so much, Chairman, again for this really incredible study, and for all of our viewers on Facebook and on YouTube who participate in these studies every week. I will make sure we get the announcement and for the Panther Cubs and the merchandise that's being, probably going to support to free political prisoners. So I'll make sure we get that announcement next week. But because of time, I want everyone to know that if your question was not answered, do not worry. We will take your question in the first hour, in the hour of questions in the next Sunday study. This study was brought to you by the Department of Agitation and Propaganda, Winning the War of Ideas. For your revolutionary news and analysis, you can visit theburningspear.com. For revolutionary radio, dynamic shows, and music by Africans all around the world, tune into Black Power 96.3 FM, broadcasting out of St. Petersburg, Florida, and accessible via the Black Power 96 app for Apple and Android, or online at blackpower96.org. Also want to do a special plug for people to tune in to the People's War Radio Show, 5 p.m. Eastern. That you can listen to it on the app, or you can catch every episode at wubp.podbean.com. The theory of African internationalism is a theory of practice. All the energy of the African People's Socialist Party is focused on the destruction of colonial capitalism. Africans of the world, go to our website, apspuhuru.org, and fill out our contact form. You can order your copy of Chairman Amalia Shitella's latest book, Vanguard, The Advanced Attachment of the African Revolution, at burningspearmarketplace.com. And the African People's Socialist Party is inviting you to our second Seventh Congress Plenary, February 6th through the 9th, 2021, themed African Workers of the World, Unite and Organize. You can register today at apspplenary.org and read the call written by Chairman Amalia Shitella. It is going to be virtual this year, so you can tune in from wherever it is that you are, in any location, in any room in your home. You can tune in to and be a part of the party's plenary. Again, that's February 6th to the 9th, apspplenary.org. Every Tuesday from 9 to 10 p.m. Eastern, join Ralph Pointer on What's Happening Blog Talk Radio. Ralph Pointer is a member of the Black Is Back Coalition for Social Justice, Peace, and Reparations, and is the chair of the Political Prisoner Working Group. He is a longtime freedom fighter and leads the Lynn Stewart Committee. To tune in via phone, call 347-857-3293, or you can listen on the computer at Blog Talk Radio Human Rights Blog. We're calling on people to follow the All African Peoples Development and Empowerment Project on Facebook, or visit developmentforafrica.org for important information and helpful tips in regards to the colonial virus COVID-19. APDEP has recently launched the International Telehealth Program, a free resource for African people to get our COVID-19 related questions and concerns answered by licensed doctors and nurses through Project Black On. I know some people have questions about a vaccine and things like that, and APDEP is answering those questions. So make sure you touch bases on their website, on their social media pages. You can make your free virtual appointment on the telehealth program with one of their professional health providers by going to developmentforafrica.org/telehealth. Looking for more opportunities of live political education from Chairman Amalia Shitella? Tune in every Wednesday at 3 p.m. Eastern on the Chairman Amalia Shitella Facebook like page and Burning Spear TV YouTube page with the Chairman's address to the African nation, discussing important topical issues and providing us with an African internationalist analysis. And Chairman did mention that he's going to be talking about the arrest of INFAC leader Grandmaster Jay. So again, 3 p.m. Eastern, Chairman's Facebook and Burning Spear TV YouTube pages. Lastly, to keep up with our movement events, visit theburningspear.com's events page and subscribe to our mailing list. Thank you all for tuning in. Make sure you like and subscribe to the Burning Spear TV on YouTube to catch every episode of the